Today we're going to be making a dirty driven patch with the HX Stomp. We're going to run into a few limitations with the DSP. We're going to also use some really cool tricks to get around that too. If you stick around to the end of this video, you will learn some of those cool tricks and tips and get a massive stereo patch on the HX Stomp. We're starting off with the Cartographer amp, which is based on a modified trainer. This is a really bright amp. We're going to try and dial out a little bit of that top end sizzle. It's not exactly what we're going for today, but it's a great start. We want a really bright amp to start off with, and the reasons for that we will explore a little bit later. We're going to hard pan both of the guitar amps today to really intensify that stereo width. If you want a slightly less extreme stereo setup, you can pan them a little bit less to make that width slightly more subtle. I really love the sound of these rev amps, but already we can tell that they are not the exact sound that we're going to go for. Once you hear the rectifier, you get that immediate bottom end and body, which makes the stereo sound super thick, which is why we used the Cartographer a little bit earlier to get that bright, sizzly sound that pairs super well with the rectifier, bassy bottom end boom. When we pair these two amps together, you can really hear that they gel well. So we've got a really good basis to start off with here. When we switch both amps on together, you can hear that the EQs being so different really complement each other. And with them being both panned hard left and hard right, you get a super wide stereo width already. The one problem that I do have here is the background hiss. And with two amps running a little bit of gain, you will always get that hiss. So what I do in this situation is get a noise gate involved. You could save a little bit of DSP here by ignoring the noise gate, but the hiss is something that I can't deal with. If it's not so much of a bother to you, hit me up in those comments below and let me know. When we start pushing the threshold on the noise gate, I'm starting to hear a little bit that top end slip away. Because of that, I'm going to opt to use the hard gate rather than the noise gate here. To my ear, the hard gate just cuts the noise from the signal and doesn't alter the EQ too much. We're going to add a tube screamer here to start shaping that EQ. It's really common when using gain on amps to use a tube screamer to tighten up the EQ. The tube screamer after the amp sims sounds really terrible. It sounds almost fuzz-like, but with a really harsh treble. So we're going to run it at the front end. In a traditional setup, you'd probably run it in the effects loop, but in this instance, we can't do that as both the amp and the cab are one block. We're going to get rid of that tube screamer now because I think both amps sound pretty good together anyway. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of ambience. This is where we run into DSP issues. The reverb section is completely greyed out. We're going to try and emulate a faux kind of reverb with an analog delay in the circuit. Bringing the feedback time and the repeats down makes it almost kind of faux spring reverby. We've got a really usable tone here, but rather than making do with an analog delay, I wanted to get a reverb into this circuit. So what we need to do is free up some DSP now. The big culprit for soaking up DSP in this patch is the rectifier. We're going to switch it out for the Park 75, which is a slightly less boomy and bassy amp. But before we start tweaking any of the EQ, we're going to test to see if this one allows some reverb. Now that we've found out that it does work with the reverb, we're going to audition this Park amp and see if we can get a nice, rich and warm tone that we can use to complement the cartographer model. We're getting close to finalizing this stereo patch, so we're going to mess about with some of the EQ settings on the reverb just to make sure it sits really nicely with both amplifiers and doesn't get in the way. We want it to be the least intrusive to our overall tone. With the DSP mostly gone, you can notice we don't actually have many choices left, but we do have the option of a tremolo, and we're going to add one just for fun. We're going to set it to have a nice slow throb to it to get a real kind of swampy blues tone. The subtle movement of that tremolo really adds to this patch, and I think that's where we're done for this one. If you want to learn how to make a clean stereo patch on the HX Stomp, click on the video that's showing now. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you again soon.